Welcome to this week's edition of Friday Special. I'm Waqas Majid Khan. Today we're talking about the deal between Russia and India, where they have signed a $5 billion deal for the S400 air defense system, and what are the ramifications for the region and its security. To talk about it, let me introduce my guests in the studio. Joining me for the conversation, first of all, we have AVM Ikramullah Bhatti Saab with us. With him, we have Shahid Kiani Saab and Dr. Oqab Malik. Thank you very much, sir, for being here. Sir, the perception is that this particular deal is going to destabilize the balance of power in the region, especially when it comes to India and Pakistan. What are your views on this, sir? Do you think that this deal will go through in the first place?
Well, what we read in the media is that even when Putin had taken off from Moscow for New Delhi, they didn't know what all are they going to sign, if at all they are going to sign anything. Secondly, Mr. Trump has not yet revealed his reaction to this deal. And we also know about the CATSA that
Absolutely, sir. The sanctions regime.
Yes, that's very clear. So a lot is yet to show up, which is not yet visible. But the fact remains that if the Indians and Russians have gone ahead and signed this deal, I believe it must have been done with a fair amount of degree of comfort vis-a-vis the American sanctions. And we can assume that they would have had a nod or a go-ahead from the Americans, only then they have gone ahead and signed. Unless the Americans wanted to embarrass the Russians or the Indians, which I don't think so. But then it is Mr. Donald Trump that we are dealing with.
So you never know.
So who is highly unpredictable, and he likes to be unpredictable. So we'll have to wait and see.
All right, sir. The Foreign Office has reacted to this news, and they've said that it basically means an arms race is getting accelerated in the region as a result of this deal, and it is also something for the Pakistani security apparatus to worry about. What's your opinion on this, sir?
I think the spokesperson's statement, in my opinion, was very balanced. Instead of a knee-jerk reaction of saying that, look, that country's done that and that, this is a deal between two sovereign countries, first. With Russia, we are enlarging our relationship. So the reaction was right. Instead of criticizing Russia why they have sold this weaponry to India, which is our arch adversarial, adversary, we have to see it in the context of a deal signed with two countries. Naturally, it does create discomfort within Pakistan because it's basically defensive weaponry, but this does give an edge to India, which already has a very large edge over conventional forces in Pakistan. But at the same time, I think we need to work to find out as to how we can create a better understanding with Russia, who has decades of relationship, a very close relationship with India. How we can benefit. If we cannot get S400, we can get another a different type of weaponry from Russia. Why not? We are now, the best thing which has happened is that we are part of SCO, where we are interacting, especially our armed forces are interacting with the Russian military leadership. We have seen a flurry of visits from Russia to Pakistan, from Pakistan to Russia. So I think we should see it from that context. And yes, as far as our discomfort is concerned, I'm sure we must have taken the Russian leadership into account. But one thing which worries, and you had just talked about it, is the Americans' double standards. As far as, since this weaponry is being given to India by Russia, so they will give them a waiver, and they will say, "Oh, I've heard."
Well, that remains to be seen,
yeah,
sir.
No,
we don't know as yet.
There's already an opinion from the American officials. They say that since India is a strategic partner, it's a friend, and we cannot, undermine the Indians. Same is the case you will see when the Indians will be buying oil from Iran. Same is the thing. But if we do that, if we were to reach out to Russia and ask for such weaponry, we will be in one big soup, I can tell you. This is the double standards, dichotomy in the US foreign relations, and for which we are not surprised.
Oka, what is your view on this?
Well, I'm looking at it in a geostrategic manner. And I look at what Russia is trying to do, try to wean away India from the United States and cause divisions, for example. India's been, as you rightly said, acquiring arms and weaponry for decades and decades from the inception of modern India, from the Soviet Union, and then henceforth after that, Russia as well. So it's not new in that respect. What is new in this equation is the relationship between the United States and India, and the power projection that the Americans want the Indians to have in the Indian Ocean to protect their interests vis-a-vis China. Now, in this deal, alongside this S400 deal was a deal for stealth frigates, which didn't go through. Now, you've got to look at what the Russians want as well. They don't want to antagonize the Chinese, because the S400 is a defensive weapon, as you mentioned, and it's there for last resort use. In essence, when there's a likely attack, and it's put on readiness, so it'll prevent any future attack from Pakistan or China. And in that respect, it's not an offensive weapon. It could be seen as that because our capabilities will be inherently reduced in comparison. However, allowing frigates to occur, to come into their 200 ship navy that they want by 2027, which the Indians are desperately working towards, would allow enhanced power projection in the Indian Ocean, which would go against the Chinese interests as well, which is obviously a pressure that's coming to Russia from that side.
Well, it seems...
but my point here is, when you talk about double standards for the United States, it's a strategic ally, and Pakistan is not. So well, where's the double standards?
We find that very strange, because Pakistan has been the most allied ally since its inception.
But at the end of the day, when we're looking at a new change in the world global order and the rise of China, and you're talking about Russian animosities towards the United States and vice versa, look at that relationship become very sour. It is a strategic win, if you really think about it, by Russia.
Well,
to divide this alliance up slightly.
Let's talk about that. Do you think, sir, that America would find itself in a bit of a catch-22 situation? Because on the one hand, they don't want the Indians to engage with the Russians. They want to wean India off Russian weapons and themselves become the largest suppliers to India. Because right now it's the Russians. Moreover, when we talk about the strategic relationship between Russia, India, and the United States, it's going to be quite a balancing act. It seems that India is getting its cake and getting to eat it as well. That's what we're seeing happening.
Well, you see, India today is far more important to the US than what Pakistan is. So the Americans would be willing to keep India happy. But at the same time, you see, when the Indians place an order for a missile system which is over $5 billion, maybe around $6 billion, then it's a shot in the arm for the Russian defense industry. Are the Americans willing to allow that? That's another question. But when we look at the other such sales or similar sales, we know that the Turks have also placed an order for S400. They have also placed an order for F-35 from the US. And they have also they are already part of that consortium, which is
But Turkey is part of NATO, sir.
True, but at the same time, CATSA applies to them.
It should.
It should
technically, but we don't know that.
So
because the president can give a waiver.
True, but then these sales are certainly a test case for the Americans, because they will lose moral ground if they allow the Indians or give them a waiver. If they allow the Turks to give them a waiver, and while the Turks are buying that S-400, they are buying F-35 from the Americans. And
I don't think the Americans would want to sell them the F-35 if they have the S-400 as well, because these are systems that are basically designed against each other, and if there's co-operationability between them, then the edge is lost. So the F-35 is going to lose its edge over the S-400. They would never want that to happen.
Turks are part of the consortium which is making that system.
So we don't know if the deal has happened as yet, sir.
No, but so far the Americans are going ahead with it. They have not opposed it. And maybe early next year you will have the first F-35 flying in Turkish skies.
Well, let's see if that happens.
As per the schedule. So you see, now when you come back to our region, we have a classic case where we have this Iran-Pakistan-India pipeline, which is now actually waiting on the wings to happen just because of the American sanctions. Whereas we know that the Americans have placed a deadline of 4th November for Iranian oils to be sold, and we also know that Indians are already signing agreements November onwards. So they are prepared to challenge or defy Quetzal.
Not only that, sir, there are also many commentators within India who are saying that we are a sovereign nation and we will not be pushed around by Washington. And that is another thing that Mr. Modi is playing on, because his popularity has been sinking. And by doing this, he's showing his domestic audience that India is a really strong country and is able to make decisions on its own and does not need to be dictated by Washington or Moscow for that matter. And they're playing the game, they're playing Washington against Moscow and getting the benefits for it. That's the way it seems it's playing out. Would you like to comment on that, sir?
I would like to just enlarge my discussion of my colleagues, the AVM and Mr. Okab. India has got away with dealing with these, once the superpower and then now the sole superpower, for a long time. And I'll give you. There's a very interesting book, JFK's Forgotten Crisis, which was the 1962 missile crisis and the Indochina War. Neville Maxwell has written very big about it. And you will see they have got away with it because according to the now released paper of Johnson administration, they said that we cannot allow 1 billion people to be eaten up by the communists, like they talked about China. So they've gotten away with it. Indians' institutions are extreme. Let us talk about little bit. Are extremely strong. They are known to be very independent in their thinking. Their political system, the institutions are strong. So they will never be aligned with one party or one government forever. They've taken advantage of United States earlier. Look at what they did. They had their relationship with the United States just prior to the 62 Indochina War was, at their lowest ebb, but it took off since then. And now just one liner. Since Clinton, Bush, Obama and Trump, now you see the Indian narrative and the US narrative about us is now very close, and it's in our opinion very annoying, but this is what it is. Now about the morality, AVM saying, I think morality plays a very, very low key in foreign relations. What is in foreign policy, it is the national interest which dictates. India's national interest dictates that yes, India knows that the United States needs India in pushing China, which it failed, but they are using them. He talked about the United States having a strategic dialogue. We also started a dialogue in 2013 with the United States.
It's still going on, sir.
Going on. So, and then we have been a non-NATO ally. We have been the main the interlocutor as far as Afghanistan is concerned. We are doing our best. We are fighting their war. Let me be honest. Earlier we fought, now we are fighting on war. As far as Pakistan is concerned, I would again, sir, insist these are United States double standards which they've been applying, which we know they will be applying. What we need to do is, sir, why we are not being taken very seriously. Chinese have been telling us become politically stable and economically vibrant. On both the accounts, as a political development concerned, I think we are in a much happier position than we were. The third transition, democratic transition, has taken place. Our institution getting stronger, but economically we are extremely weak. So when we have a dialogue with countries, we are as an economically non-sovereign country, we are on a weak wicket at this time. But we will not stay like this. We will improve. Only then the country will start taking us seriously, including the United States, including India.
All right, Okab, do you agree with what Kiani Saab is saying? But also, I would like to ask you that by buying this particular missile defense system, the S400, in effect, India is lowering the nuclear threshold within the region and also accelerating the arms race, compelling other countries, especially Pakistan, to also follow suit and make arrangements to counter the S-400. So it is going to be bad, and it's going to increase instability overall in the region. What do you say?
Well, let's see how far the region is. If we include China, this is a balancing act. The Chinese have already acquired the S-400.
Yes.
Yeah? The Indians are acquiring. That balances, puts it to a certain degree of parity, because they've got to put some squadrons of the S-400 along the Pakistan border, and they'll be applying some others near China. So that would balance everything out on that side. On this side, however, you're correct. We don't have the technology to defeat any missile system such as this. It is the best one available in deployment, although the Russians have put into production the S-500 already at the beginning of the year. So that's going to be a much more advanced system with a height of 60 kilometers. So, you know, they're looking forward to another thing altogether. But you're right. To an extent, you're talking about instability, but that also depends on the perspective that you use. If you use a security and security box that they're trying to acquire security, which provides insecurity for us, then we try to provide security for us by acquiring arms, which they feel insecure with. It's an arms race in real terms. But we've also got to look at the necessities of what India is trying to do, because their engagement, if you remember the cold start doctrine, which came to nothing at the end of the day because we countered them with al-Nasser, and the idea that we were pushing forward our strategic battlefield weapons, which has been used as a terminology, for example, tactical nukes, but that's not the case. They're still strategically controlled, so they're not tactical in any way. So that kind of defeated their idea of cold start doctrine. So it went against them. It's a cat and mouse game, really, isn't it? So what are we going to do about that? Now, I've been reading up about the S-400 quite a bit in advance as well, and before, and trying to find out what would Pakistan do to counter this, because the Indians have been looking at the S-400 for about 3 years already, since 2015. So it's nothing new. And so we should have been very well prepared for this, given the relationship with the Indians and the Americans anyway. Yeah? We've been pretty much distracted with other things, unfortunately, thinking there's going to be a savior saving us, which is highly unlikely in any event. So I think we need to look at, this is the unfortunate part, that we're developing MIRVs, multiple independent entry vehicles, meaning warheads. So a missile contains maybe 8 to 10 MIRVs, warheads, that they would need to deploy at least 2 of these per warhead, and that means 16, so the whole battery of these would go out. And the guarantee of having a target acquisition based on the fact that the MIRVs are not going to have the same quality as another missile, and it's going to be harder to track, and the smaller size of it, it's going to be very difficult. They might waste things. So that's the option that we have. But you know, we're going down the Cold War path now. Like when the Soviet Union and the West went against each other and eventually had 70,000 weapons, which could have destroyed the Earth 10 times over, a complete nuclear annihilation. And we're looking down that. And I think this is a point of concern and pause. That, hold on a second, because we're going to bankrupt ourselves.
In the process.
And the fact is, with any modern trajectory, economic trajectory, India is going to far surpass even the Americans in the next 20, 30 years economically. Forget about us. We don't have the economic means to do so. But then we come down to this point again, don't we? Where we talk about all and most, in fact, of the peace initiatives have come from us and been rejected by them for whatever their concerns are, which is disconcerting to us further. So what are our options? We have to really think about that. There's nothing that we can just slide over. And it's nothing just technologically based, you know.
It's bad news
and a certain
for the
degree of
regional,
intransigence from our side as well, and their side needs to come to a pass of what we're trying to do to each other. It's a non-winnable war, this is.
Absolutely. There's also some political ramifications of this deal, and if the Americans do give the Indians a waiver in this particular case, then they cannot justify that because they have already applied sanctions on China for exactly the same deal. So that's not going to go very well in the global political climate, and especially with the European Union also will not be very happy if they just turn a blind eye to these Russian arms sales to India, considering what they did in Ukraine. So what's your comment on that, sir?
Who cares?
The Americans don't. Unfortunately.
That's good.
Who cares? You see, we just learned from our seasoned diplomat that morality has no place,
No place.
in international politics.
All right.
So, if the Americans want to give that waiver to the Indians or to the Turks, so
But wouldn't that come to the United
be it.
Nations Security Council as something to talk about? No? Do you
no,
think
it's
that?
between, it's not a UN subject. I mean, it's between two countries.
Okay.
And unless Pakistan gets embargoed for importing oil from Iran or importing gas from Iran, and Pakistan goes to the Security Council that here is it, this is CATSA, and this is how they treated the other countries, hence, and this treatment is unfair to us, so the Americans should not be, doing this to us, and that gets vetoed, and that's the end of the story.
Right.
So I think while the Indians, when they acquire S400, of course, this is a very significant capability. They're going to deny Pakistan the use of medium of air for war. It could be, against our ballistic missiles. It could
Some
be against
experts
our
believe, sir, that
AWACS.
it's going to devastate our Air Force, and our Air Force also now needs to make completely different plans or come up with new plans.
Certainly, you see, because it's a threat to our AWACS, it is a threat to our strike aircraft, it's a threat to our ballistic missiles.
It can also be used as an offensive weapon, sir, and they can use it to take out our air bases.
Not air bases. Basically, it is aimed against flying objects. It could be, drones.
Well,
it could
according
be
to the reports, this particular technology, the S400, can strike a target 5 meters off the ground. That's how low it can go, and it travels at 15 Mach speed. So
no, you see, there are 5 different types of
missiles that are.
And while the radar looks 600 kilometers, the missiles have a range of between 40 to 400 kilometers. The Indians have bought or planning to buy 1,000 missiles, mostly of a longer range. But you see, essentially, it is against flying objects, which could be drones, which could be cruise missiles, which could be ballistic missiles, which could be aircraft, which could be AWACS.
But however way you look at it, sir, it is going to be a major threat to Pakistan's security.
Certainly. You see, Pakistan has a host of options. The very first option is like the French option. My first choice is a nuclear choice.
And that would be devastating, sir. And that's why we are having this
Again,
conversation.
who cares?
Well, that's.
This is very problematic.
I think that's a very problematic stance. Sir.
The fact is,
that's a very suicidal sort of way to look at it, sir.
You see, the fact is, the entire world should be worried. That's what I intend to say. When
Absolutely.
you say, who cares? Certainly, the entire world cares. Entire world cares. So.
Oh, they should.
They ought to, because you see, when they see doomsday approaching because of these two belligerent nations, so everybody wants to live. They want to enjoy this world.
But at the same time, they also want to keep selling arms to these two belligerent nations so that their business keeps flourishing.
Of course.
But these two belligerent nations can't see that.
Yep.
That's amazing. That is the most incredible part.
But you have to live to enjoy all that. So I'm sure everybody, all those sellers, they would like to, this world to remain intact and, so that they can continue to enjoy the fruits of this, business of death. And of course, they would like to make sure that a certain threshold is not crossed.
Well, talking about the threshold, sir, by the acquisition of this particular system, that would further increase the conventional military asymmetry between Pakistan and India. So Pakistan is going to be worried, and we'll be forced to spend money on weapons when we should be actually spending it on our own people. And similarly with the Indians as well, they're spending all this money on those weapons when they should be actually looking after 50% of their population, which is below the poverty line. What do you think about that, sir?
President Nixon is in his book, The Leaders, has aptly described Pakistan and India, both. He said it's astounding that in the modern history, he has never come across these two countries who are spending, senselessly on the acquisition of weapons when their own people are dying of hunger, and so this is an opinion. So the thing is, our spokesperson is very right. So we cannot go on a buying spree. Look what happened to Star Wars technology initiated by Reagan and what happened to the Soviet Union. So I think we will have to strike a balance between our resource, we are resources constrained, our these social sectors. Naturally, national security comes first, but look at the people. If you starve your people and you bring, Indians will be doing the same, bringing your people down to look at the health and skill and education sectors and skill sectors. If your people go down 10 years, 15 years down the road, if they have nothing to prove. The other thing is, as compared to Vajpayee, who's also a BJP leader, he was a more sensible person. You look at during the Kargil war, he was able to manage that war without, antagonizing, without enlarging the conflict. He did it in a manner, and which was, which did not create more fissures with Pakistan, even though our handling of Kargil leaves much to be desired. But at this time, when Modi is the successor of Vajpayee, you have a government. Now, let me just share with you, government whose vision, world vision or regional vision, is far different from the BJP. Another disturbing thing, sir, is with all this saber rattling going on by the Indians, the United States is a silent partner, total silent. Earlier, whenever things got wrong, got bad with Pakistan and India, the back channel, the US opened up the back channel trying to calm down these two nuclear states, because according to US, they say that Pakistan and India are irresponsible nuclear states, according to them. But now you will see a total silence, and again, sir, we come back to the same thing, that the acquisition by India, this thing, naturally speaking, accelerates the arm race. We cannot afford it. Neither in the longer term the Indian will afford it. Their population is rising. It's an extremely important, economic power. But how long would they sustain? How long would they keep on paying for huge amount of money? Because one has to ask this question from the Indians: who are your enemies? Who are you being threatened with? Would you fight a war with China? You've already learned a lesson from it. Their own, if you look at their own, the papers which they have released, it was a total disaster. Even now, if they ever go of war with China, believe not, Indians will be the biggest losers. So why are they acquiring this thing? For what? They are
for
not,
us, obviously,
so
sir.
naturally speaking, with us, and is Pakistan a threat to India? Please,
that is a very big question,
they should
sir.
get their,
Are we?
Sir, they should get their head checked. Naturally speaking,
You mentioned Kargil, sir, earlier. I want to bring this question to Mr. Okab. Because of Kargil, the Indians seem that their ego has been diminished or hurt, and they keep talking about surgical strikes, and they keep talking about a limited war. And this acquisition of the S400 system is definitely going to increase their capability of starting a limited war, whatever space there is for that. What do you think is going to happen if that happens, if they do?
Look at the flip side. Because we're talking as if you're in the fire. And because you're in the fire, you can't really, and because you're being hit from all sides, you can't really see what the actual reason for the fire is. And I find that we need to step back a little bit and try to understand where we are and what we're doing. When you're within the arms race, you just keep on pushing forward some more arms race, and so do they. And as you've just said, you can't really see where you are going. So we really need to take a step back and say, hold on a second, how far are we willing to go? However, when it comes to India and Pakistan, they can go a lot further than we can. I mean, that's pretty obvious as far as economics are concerned. But the end product would be devastation. And so we've got to put it into this place that we need to realize where we need to stop. And that means them as well. And try to understand each other. And when you talk about who's the enemy, are we really the enemy? What is this all about? And who is it? Does it really satisfy? Who are the powers that win out from a war between India and Pakistan? Because India and Pakistan won't win out. So who antagonizes all this? And for what reason? So once you try to understand the wider picture, you try to appreciate, maybe you've got other options then. And I think we need to have a less myopic, a much broader perspective on these things. So coming back to your question, I think this is a complicated issue because of our particular political, economic circumstances at the moment, that we're put in a particular position now with the IMF issue going on, and then Modi signs a deal exactly last week on Friday, that it's coming to a head for us. And we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. There's a lot of criticism, by the way, about how we've handled a lot of the projects and the high interest rates and losing our sovereignty to external power, who we call higher than the mountains and deeper than the oceans and sweeter than honey. But I tell you, it's all about the money. Yeah? So we really got to appreciate our strategic objectives are number one. And we really got to calculate everything according to the wider puzzle, not just a couple of pieces are moving around and then jump into that without seeing the wider implications of everything. And we've got a lot more leverage than we actually think we have, because there's a lot more at play. When we talk about morality and double standard, there is no double standards in international relations. It doesn't exist. That's a contradiction with the idea that there's a morality as well. You say there's no morality, but there's double standards. Double standards is based on the idea of morality.
Yes, but when the Americans project the idea of freedom and liberty and democracy and
that's within
and
their
equality,
country.
that is morality.
But it is.
And it plays in the interrelationships of states.
But the biggest point here...
That's what they use excuses to sanction countries.
But the biggest point here...
Morality is what they use.
But the biggest point here is all about power.
Sure.
So nobody gives a damn about morality and double standards as long as you're winning.
They use it, or rather abuse the concept.
Well, it's just a tool. It's an instrument.
Absolutely.
And they use it very well. And it's called social media, and it's called public affairs, yeah? And it's called soft power. And the Indians use it very well, and we're very bad at it, by the way. Yeah?
Yes.
So we've got to look at the flip side and see how we're doing very well. This is to indoctrinate people's minds that there's somebody's winning based on the idea of evil, and this is more evil and we're less evil, but they're more evil. So we've got to beat the evil with a little bit of evil and push down the evil. But it's all evil. Now people come into this and they fall into this trap, and they just want to live. Everywhere in the world, majority, 99.9% of the population of the world just wants to live and get a meal and have a happier life generally, but they're not able to because the people in power want power. And that's unfortunate, and that's the nature of human beings, unfortunately, which is pretty dismal.
Going back to the politics of this deal, the US will really have to weigh the pros and cons of sanctioning India, and also they'll have to weigh the benefits of not sanctioning India in this case. It is going to be a tricky tightrope for the Americans to walk as well. Don't you agree, sir?
Certainly, but I guess, as I said earlier, they would have already made up their mind as to how are they going to react and respond to this development. And they would have taken their decision as to how they're going to respond. And I don't think there's going to be anything untoward coming out of it, because Putin has a soft corner for Russia, so he wouldn't mind getting another $6 billion for them. He needs Indians, so he'll...
you mean Trump, sir?
Yes, he needs the Indians against the Chinese, so he would like to keep them happy. So I think it's going to go ahead, and like we already know that they are being a little lukewarm or almost warm with the Turks. They're going to allow that sale of F-35s even when they're buying S-400. It's only countries like Pakistan, who would be cautioned against dealing with Iran or with Russia in this field.
But if this deal goes through, sir, it would also mean that America is giving away space and leverage that it usually enjoys over countries in brokering crises that take place. And the only problem is that it's Pakistan that has to deal with the imbalance of power as a result of the deal.
Well, you see, it's always the powerful which makes the rules. And we know America happens to be the sole superpower, so they make the rules.
But they're diminishing their power when it comes to India.
Well, you see, they're getting a good response in return. They're able to use India against the Chinese, so they're getting their powers or worth. So I think that's a deal that's going on over there.
What's your opinion, sir?
I would like to just clarify what my colleague Aqab has said. I would still insist there is no morality as far as foreign policy is concerned, because you are securing your national interest. What I'm saying is, the United States, I said, it's a sovereign country. Naturally speaking, Pakistan is sovereign. They can have, they can have whatever relationship they have. But the thing is, when we are being told 24/7 about what we are doing with Afghanistan, there it comes the problem of double standards. I'm not saying that what they are doing is wrong. I'm not saying they can carry on. But sir, they should try to understand our concerns also. Our concerns are, meaning just look what's happening in Afghanistan. For us, if India has commercial relations, trade relations, education, health, fine, absolutely. But if their territory is being used against us, which we have.
As it has been.
We have proof. And one important thing, sir, we will forget. The United States has become our neighbor because of its huge, large presence in Afghanistan. It's virtually running Afghanistan. There comes the problem when we share with the United States at the highest level that these are our concerns about what India is doing. Because all the attacks on the defense installations in Pakistan has taken place, they emanated from Afghanistan. They are our own people who are doing it, and there is no doubt. We should not be in a denial mode. But what is happening is, all the lead runs to the Indians or to the Afghan NDS. That is where, when the Americans say we don't know, naivety, for God's sake, how can you say that? You are controlling the whole country.
Well, only 40%, sir.
So
60% is in the
sir,
Taliban's control.
Sir, it doesn't matter. Sir, no, but one thing.
Influence.
The Americans have a huge edge over the Taliban, the satellites and the information gathering. Look at the agreement.
Every kind of technological edge they have,
sir,
and
no.
still in
Sir,
17 years they have not been able to bring them to heel, sir.
Sir, let them be losing, but at least they have the information. This cannot escape this cannot escape that Indians, they've been training and crossing over the borders. So what I'm saying is, if we are being blamed, okay, we may be at fault at certain places. We are trying to rectify that fault. Look at the flurry of the delegation which has gone from Pakistan, the Foreign Secretary, the Chief of Army Staff, and the former Prime Minister to Afghanistan. For us, Afghanistan remains important. Our Foreign Minister, Afghanistan was the first country. What are we trying to do? We are not trying to destabilize Afghanistan. We are trying to understand their concern. We have already been telling, I think in what I am reading is, encouraging the Taliban to go and talk even to the Afghan government, because that is, whatever may be, it's a legitimate government there, sir. And the Taliban, in my opinion, I think should understand and learn a lesson. This is not pre-9/11, it's post 9/11. We are doing what is humanly possible. Myself, the time has come now if we have to improve relations with the United States, we should put all the cards on the table and say, look, this is what we can do with Taliban, this is what we cannot do. So you're asking us to do something we cannot do. It is, Taliban cannot be, you see, work like a robot. They can listen to us, but now they are, as you said very rightly, they are in a very advantageous position in the 60% of the territory. So, sir, my opinion is, coming back to the Russian, my own advice would be that this deal, which is naturally of concern to us, but we should continue to enlarge our relation with Russia. This should not be an irritant. This deal should not be an irritant, should not even come under discussion. Let them enlarge. We will enlarge our relationship, and a time will come when the Russians will also assist us in the defense sector. We are working very well with them. And SCO has provided us an excellent opportunity. Look, something very interesting. Both Chinese and the Russians are quite concerned about both Indian-Pakistan's tension. They allowed both forces to do the exercise, trying to understand each other. I think we should commend China and Russia for, bringing the temperature down.
I think that's a very, very good analysis, sir.
Yes, we keep on talking about Afghanistan, but let's hold the brakes here. I think you're completely right about the local environment, regional issues that we have. But the United States playing a much bigger game here, and much bigger stakes are at play here. They have multiple theaters of war the size of Afghanistan. They deal with it in different ways. For us, Afghanistan's a be-all, end-all, everything in a way. It's a very large issue for us because it's our neighbor and it's in our face. And it's been a big issue for us for the last 40 plus years. But for the Americans, it's not as big an issue as you might think it is for them, because it's not. It's one small part of the big puzzle that they've got to deal with. And India is a much bigger asset than anything that Afghanistan can do. And so we have to look at relative. Are they willing to sacrifice a pawn, or will you sacrifice a queen? You wouldn't sacrifice a queen. It's more advantageous to have the queen and knock off the pawn. And Pakistan is a pawn to them. In the real strategic environment, and as you see the picture as it is,
Yeah, but sometimes
that's what it is.
Sometimes it's the pawn that does checkmate.
Yeah, you know,
Yeah, well,
that's another little fantasy that we can do then.
Yes, absolutely.
But however,
But we're out of time.
But however,
We're out
the
of time.
real picture is here.
Absolutely.
Great power
Brings
game
great
that this
responsibility.
is going on is really great power. There's no comparison between Afghanistan
All right.
and the next, and now the new Cold War that's erupted. So
Yes, it's
there's
unfortunate.
nothing.
Very
That's
unfortunate.
just one pawn.
And the arms race keeps on going.
And it'll carry
that's
on.
the bottom line.
Because
Well,
we're humans. And we're
thank you
stupid.
very much for taking out the time and sharing your views with PTV World. It was a great discussion. You heard the conversation, and in the end, we always say, please draw your own conclusions from what you've heard. That's all the time we have. Goodbye.